Hey everyone, it is Biblical Brennan here. This is my 2025 Lads to Leader speech, and the theme was God Meant It for Good. I'm sorry that the video is vertical, and the video started a little bit late, so I'm gonna say what I said before the video started. It's not much. If I were to give you a 1,000 piece puzzle,
no reference as to what it is supposed to look like, do you think you would be able to solve it? Maybe after a couple of hours, you would get a pretty good picture of what you think it's supposed to look like, and eventually you think you know exactly what this puzzle is supposed to be. And as you were working very hard to solve this puzzle, something that you don't really want to happen happens. You see, I come into wherever you were solving this puzzle, and I start to move around the pieces. I put things where you don't think they should be. I take apart pieces you would snap together that you thought absolutely went together, and I move things wherever they are just absolutely not supposed to go. And once I'm finished, you take a step back from the puzzle and you look down at it. And after looking at it for a little bit, you realize that I didn't completely ruin your hours of hard work. I actually set this puzzle on the correct course. I fixed it. And this is the way that God worked in the life of Joseph. And it is the way that God still works in our lives today. You see, Genesis 50, verse 20 says, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." You see, something terrible happened to Joseph, but it didn't start out bad. You see, Joseph grew up being his father, Jacob's, favorite son, but this favoritism led his brothers to act out of jealousy. And so, in exchange for some money, they decided to sell Joseph to some traders to go work as a slave in Egypt. Now, Joseph was working as a slave under a master that the Bible says was actually nice to him. But while Joseph was working, his master's wife tried to sin against him and then lied about him. This lie landed Joseph a spot in jail. You see, now Joseph has suffered being taken from his family. He has suffered being sold into slavery and being lied about and eventually being put into jail. Now, from a human standpoint, there is basically nothing that can redeem Joseph. Basically nothing that can make this something good. But God does not have a human standpoint. God is not a human. God worked in Joseph's life to eventually make him second in command over all of Egypt. And while Joseph was in charge, a famine struck the land. But luckily, 7 years prior to this famine, God had granted Joseph the ability to interpret Pharaoh's dream and find out that this famine was happening. After interpreting the dream, Joseph found out that there would be 7 good years and 7 years of famine. And so he made the decision to save up crops during the good years. And so during this famine, Joseph's brothers needed to buy food. And so they went to Egypt, where they eventually encountered Joseph and find out that it is him. And they are scared, afraid that he is going to do something against them. But he tells them that what they meant for evil, God had meant for good, because it meant that he would be able to save the lives of many people. But Joseph isn't the only example of something bad being turned into something good. Because in Judges 7, we find Gideon, the recently appointed judge who is preparing to go to war against the nation of Midian. And Gideon's army has about 30,000 troops, which at that time was a relatively large army. But God comes to Gideon and says, "It's too many people. You need to lower the numbers." So God has them leave if they are fearful of going to war. Anybody who is scared has to leave. And this leaves this army with only 10,000 people. And so God comes to Gideon again and says, "It's still too many people." So he has all the troops drink from a river, and those who got on their hands and knees to drink had to leave. And this left the army with only 300 people. God took this 30,000 soldier army and whittled it down to only 300 people. And again, from a human standpoint, many might think How can they possibly defeat Midian with only 300 troops? Well, the only way would be with the help of God. You see, God knew the strategy. God decided to take them by surprise instead of using their numbers. And after the war, they completely defeated the country of Midian. This helps us clearly see how God can take anything, no matter how bad it is, into a surprising victory. So now we're going to look at what can we learn from these stories. Well, the first thing is that a key part of executing God's plan is patience. You see, we find that our struggles can be used for good either a short or a long period of time. Like in the story of Gideon, it was likely only a few days that the bad turned into good. But in the story of Joseph, it was years and years of setting up for this good thing to finally happen. But whenever it did, it was so good and worth the wait. The next thing is that God can use any problem for good. There is no problem that is too big or too small that God can turn into good. It doesn't matter what struggle, any betrayal, any lies, any pain that we go through can be turned into good by God. And next, the story of Joseph teaches us that we shouldn't hold grudges. You see, if Joseph had never forgiven his brothers, then maybe he would have acted against them and gone against God. But instead, Joseph forgave them, and God brought them together to reunite and rekindle their relationship. If he had never, ever forgiven them, then it wouldn't have been part of God's plan. It wouldn't have been what God wanted from Joseph. But he decided to forgive instead of holding this grudge. And finally, we learn that God will never give up on us. If we are in our lowest mountain or our highest valley, God is still there. God is still working. So if you feel like your puzzle is completely scrambled up, or maybe you feel like your puzzle was completely perfect until something bad came and completely changed it, just remember to stay strong because God is working, and whatever bad you're going through, God meant it for good.